With me now, Don Calloway, host of the Caucus Room podcast and CEO of Pine Street Strategies, along with Republican strategist Susan Del Percio and former Republican Congressman David Jolly, both MSNBC political analysts. And so great to have you guys here, my Sunday family, on this big day. Don, is there another Trump than Trump the provocateur? I mean, he can't seem to help himself from using personal attacks and focusing on personal vendettas. Is there any point to even asking, can he change?
No, there is no other Donald Trump, but this is who he's always been. But, you know, every shtick, every non-substantive jig always comes to an end. Unfortunately for the country and real people who suffered under this Trump regime, people died, people suffered while he held a death grip on the Republican Party. But no, there is no other Trump, and there never has been. You know, I really go back to 2010 when I saw a lot of the worst elements that Trump represents really being germinated in the form of the Tea Party, but the Republican Party embraced that because those people were more inclined to vote R. But it has been a non-substantive party for a whole long time, and Trump is a symptom of that. He is not the root cause of that. But there is no other Trump. This is the act. This is the thing. And Lindsey Graham is a very savvy politician, and what we just heard is him recognizing that this era coming to an end, but there's no way for Trump to imbue himself with some type of substantive wisdom in the next 79 days. That does not mean that Republicans cannot win. Democrats still have an extraordinary outreach and registration and making sure people are prepared to vote lift, but there will be no pivot to substance that a bunch of Republican buckety mucks are somehow suddenly asking for after 10 years.
Yeah. You know, Susan, there's this thought that this honeymoon period for Harris, that eventually Trump and Republicans will settle on real attack lines that focus on the issues. It does not seem to be happening. And then after the convention, would there be time for Republicans to try to define the vice president the way they want to?
There certainly will be time after the convention. Although the first votes are cast in mid to late September via early voting, the American public will start really tuning in at that point. The Republicans have lost an important critical opportunity to start defining Vice President Harris. However, they're going to get a lot more bites at the apple. If we think about what's happened in the last month in American politics, it's not hard to imagine the month of September being equally topsy-turvy. And the other thing that's so important to remember is that we are a divided nation. I don't care who the Republican and who the Democrat were on the top of the ticket. For the most part, this was going to be a close race. It's going to come down to a few states and a few, maybe less than 100,000 voters. So I expect that Trump's team will start to get on a message. But Lindsey Graham is so interesting to watch. I just have to go back to that for a minute. I mean, he's willing to kind of go after Trump a little bit on his campaigning. But more importantly, in that interview, he had such kind words for Joe Biden, which will surely get the former president, very angry.
Yeah, he doesn't want to hear that. So, David, Von Hilliard told us yesterday that the Trump rally arena was not filled to the rafters, and about 30 minutes or so into Trump's speech, that crowd started trickling out slowly. Trump defended his choice to give these very long speeches while also forgetting which state he was in. Listen up.
A guy's waiting with his family for 3.5, 4 days. They have a tent, and the tent is set up. They have hundreds of them, and they wait. And then I walk in, speak for 15 minutes, and leave. I don't know. Somehow, would that be okay, North Carolina?
Yeah, he was in Pennsylvania. Does this point to the general sense that Trump's ramblings are wearing on his supporters?
Oh, absolutely. Look, Donald Trump's a hero in his own mind. He always will be. But what we're seeing from these events is he's more like the aging rock star whose fans have kind of faded away. And so it's more like a reunion tour for him. It just doesn't quite have the spark it had in 2016. And the lack of enthusiasm is there as well. And he's not helping himself. Lindsey Graham's comments are very serious. To have Lindsey Graham, of all people, the senator from South Carolina, despite all his flip-flopping on Trump, call out Donald Trump as being a candidate off message, ineffective, and likely to lose to Vice President Harris. And he's right. Lindsey Graham is right. Donald Trump will likely lose to Vice President Harris as we stand here today. What the Trump camp needs to do It's not throw the whole kitchen sink at her, which is what they've been trying to do. They missed their opportunity to define her, and now they're throwing everything from communism to socialism to immigration to stolen valor, everything. Nothing sticking. I think the only thing that dramatically changes this race is an intervening international or domestic event beyond our sights right now. A debate performance that perhaps changes things, a Harris stumble, or the only offensive tool that Trump could really do is a Willie Horton-style ad, something that is so specific, not general, so specific that they're trying to tie to Vice President Harris that it sticks. But right now, Donald Trump is a candidate incapable of doing that. And at this point, it's the vice president's race.
Well, certainly. Don, did you want to say something? Apparently, you're chomping at the bit.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. I've tried to make this point last week quite inarticulately. It cannot happen short of some catastrophic event like David and Susan point out. The reason why is because a campaign and an administration are more than just the candidate. A campaign is made up of people who've been doing this for the last 10, 15 years. And the people on the Republican side who have been doing this, working campaigns all around the country, they don't know how to run substantive campaigns. There's no message discipline. There's no idea of how to pivot and respond to an extraordinarily substantive candidate on the other side. And that's because they came up in the mold of their spiritual leader, Donald Trump, who knows nothing of this other than to bloviate, obfuscate, and call names. So you have people filling these campaigns doing the work who don't know how to do this. And that is because they are created in the mold of Donald Trump. And that's a 10-year project to create people who know how to do this. And Democrats have done that now over generations. Republicans have not, because they've ceded their party and their operative capacity to him and people like him.
So you mean bringing back Corey Lewandowski is not going to change all that for you, Don? I'm sorry.
Corey Lewandowski is not qualified to carry my briefcase in running campaigns.
Cool. Let's move on to this question then for you, Susan, because there's a new poll. It's from the Washington Post, and it shows Harris with a slight lead nationally, 49-45 in a head-to-head matchup. What do you make of this, and how much, if at all, do you think it's going to increase after the convention? And I ask that because she is enjoying such strong headwinds right now. They've said this never happened in modern history, modern political history, this kind of four weeks of, tailwinds. I think I said headwinds. Sorry, I meant tailwinds. Can she rise above even what she's enjoying right now to some degree?
She can, but it won't be more than a point or two. I mean, we know Donald Trump lives in the area of anywhere from 43 to 49% in any given day. The fact that we see Harris really bumping up is really more of a reflection, I believe, of enthusiasm about, for those double haters. They finally have someone to move towards who's not Donald Trump or who's not Joe Biden, with those independents who may have wanted to sit it out. We also see a lot more younger people getting engaged. Let's not forget there's people out there who weren't eligible to vote 4 years ago that were turned off by seeing the two options of Biden and Trump. So they're going there. But again, we are so divided. I do not expect to see her really jump up that high given the environment.
Okay. Last word to you on all this, David. What's your parting thought?
My parting thought is that Vice President Harris is in position to win this race. And I think the popular vote she's largely securing day by day. The Electoral College will still come in. And whatever term we call the persuadables, the reality is I think most persuadables are more substantive and less reflexive in their partisan loyalty. And those are the voters that are looking at Vice President Harris saying, I like the direction she's willing to take this country.
Okay. Good final thought. Great thoughts from all of you, as always. See you again soon. Thank you.